Enacting change is literally one thing that is the most commonly spoken about topic. It's literally the crux of everything. Enacting change over and over again. It's something that I also have self-talk about. But in addition to this, it's something I talk to business partners about. I talk to clients, coaching clients and friends and family. Everything's about enacting change. And it's literally one of those things where if you don't have clarity of what where you want to go, you know what you want to change, but you don't know what to change it to. And I know that sounds so simple, yet it is really profound. Some clarity with this is the notion of, like, if you're in line somewhere, you're hungry, right? You're so hungry, you're craving something, but you can't actually specify what it actually is you're craving. You know it's not going to hit the spot. You have limited budget, scarcity of resources, being time, being money, or whatever it may be. But you actually don't have clarity of what you want. Has this ever happened to you? You actually get to the front of the line and you don't know what you want. You just know you're hungry. And then you panic and, out of fear of, someone else behind you, holding up the line, people staring at the back of your head, like, what the hell is wrong with this idiot? He doesn't even know what he or she wants. And it's like, you don't even know what you want, yet you came there because you're hungry. You had the hunger, but yet you didn't have any specificity of what it is you want to bring in, like onto a plate, back home with you, whatever it is. You don't know what it is you want. So enacting change, literally the number one thing that is conversed with is literally what it is you want, not necessarily what you want to change, because the pain is basically what we want to change. Not enough money, we want to fix that. We want more money, but there's no specificity with what it is, like how much money, what do you want to create, what lifestyle. I don't want to be sad. I want to be happy. Yeah, there's some specific trait of what feeling you want to bring in, but go be happy. Like, that is basically just holding a thought, a happy thought, for a prolonged period of time until your state changes. It's basically clouding out the problems, or having a positive affirmation to blanket your problems with, I'll figure it out, always have, always will, and then allowing your mind to then gravitate towards a happy moment. And just letting that dwell, just being in that moment to then bring on that happiness. And I guess happiness is a skill. Like, it literally is a skill set. So then saying, I don't want to be sad anymore, I want to be happy. Is there any specific notion of what you want in that moment? So then what we kind of do is look at what is making you sad. Like, what it is making you sad. So then we know what we don't want. And then, not necessarily opposite, we then gravitate towards alignment with the values and the higher purpose, and basically where your heart-led curiosity and fascination actually goes towards, to then anchor that towards what you do want. Now, that may be a little bit confusing in its nature, but essentially it is having clarity, like being grateful to be shown what you don't want. You have an experience, you have a current way of living which you cannot stand and you want to change, right? That is the fuel. That's what enacts the change. But then you need to be able to quantify, specify where it is you want to go, right? You need some coordinates. You need a longitude, latitude, and to plug it into your system, being your mind, your supercomputer, to allow you to then piece together a to-do list basically like a mind map of how to get to that location. And generally, when you plug into a Google Maps destination, you put the coordinates in, you need to put in where you're going, and then a line gets drawn to where you are to where you want to go. And there are different options, like if there's a detour and if there is traffic, there's a rerouting that takes place. Like it's able to then work out the next fastest route. Now, like one of the most challenging things, I guess, there is actually succumbing to the route, like actually just being in that flow, knowing where you want to go and, kind of going on that path of least resistance. But then when you do experience that resistance, then you kind of go with the flow of where else can you go to then get to your destination. And yeah, you might have to backtrack, but that's okay because you're going to enjoy the drive. And you're not going to be worried about your fuel, right? Like if you're in busy traffic and you're, in an unfamiliar city, the other anxiety other than the time constraint of getting to where you have to go, especially if you're, late for an event or whatever it is actually the secondary element is your fuel. Is there a service station on the way? The third anxiety could be, is there a bathroom? And when you couple those three together, and what I like to talk about is when you're running or creating a business and then you're running a business, is you have those underlying anxieties that will overlap and intertwine and cross-collateralize, which is the nature of time constraint, and then you'll have your fuel constraint, and then you have the bathroom break. Have you had a bathroom break? And this is all metaphors, obviously, because when you're in a car, you're stuck. You're stuck in that car. You don't have a bottle with you. You can't actually get rid of whatever the looming anxiety is. You don't have a bottle, like a fuel tank per se, to like just turn out, pull over to the side of the road and refuel. And also you can't freeze time. So that's the nature of it. So being able to hack the time, being able to have a deadline that is not pressing, nor is it so far into the future, which just creates no sense of urgency. Having regular breaks, being able to enjoy that drive. Larry David mentioned, Larry David, the comedian, the co-creator of Seinfeld, he was actually on, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel, and I was watching, and one of his resolutions is actually to go to the bathroom, like to actually go to the bathroom and don't feel that anxiety. I want to go to the bathroom, pee before you leave, he calls it. And I love that analogy because on an entrepreneurial level, when the nature of peeing before you leave is just asking the question, being willing to feel stupid in the moment, or to be perceived to be stupid. Like we don't like that nature of being, but we really all are. We have no clue what we're doing here, how we got here, what's the purpose of this. There's so many conflicting religions and belief systems, but yet no one wants to feel stupid. Yet we all are. Like, I don't want to have that as a negative affirmation, but just being willing to be like, we are all kind of clueless and kind of feeling around in the dark, and we're stubbing toes and we're knocking into people and we're causing angst. Ultimately, we literally don't have a clue. Like, I know so many people who are so successful in business and just life in general, yet feel so lost because they feel like, is that it? Like, they have this anxiety of, like, as they age and as they get closer to, losing their sense of mobility and, all that kind of thing, like, even though they're far from it, they have this looming anxiety of, like, what else can I do? What else can I achieve? Is that what life's about, to pack it all in? Now, when we kind of roll back, because we're getting a bit philosophical here, but just to kind of surrender to the very fact that we actually have no clue. There are so many methods and strategies to get to an end result, and it is not a end-all solution. Hence why we kind of brainstorm that, to kind of allow that person to immerse themselves in those destination coordinates, the longitude and latitude, where do they want to go, and allow those different routes to kind of present themselves. And there's always going to be that first route that you're not super excited about, but you have to get it out. You have to get it out there, and you have to put it down. And yeah, it says time to destination. And it's like, if I repeat these habits, or if I take on this to-do list, then it is what it is. Or, the vehicle you're traveling in doesn't have good brakes, and that route, you have to go downhill, and it gives you a bit of anxiety, and you don't know how your vehicle's actually going to get through that. And again, metaphorical of putting yourself out there, actually being seen, being seen in, a capacity that your past self and the people who knew your past self are unfamiliar with, and actually you look like a joke. Like, you actually look to those people like, what the hell? That's not what she or he conveyed themselves at school, or at uni, or at, whatever it is, like, from those people. And that's what keeps us stuck, is that nature of kind of being in that moment of predictive analytics, like having that cyborg mentality of, that AI, the artificial intelligence, running that predictive analytics of, well, if I did that, if I go to that, fourth item, the fifth item on the to-do list, then people are going to be like, what the hell? But then you kind of allow that to simmer. And again, metaphors are the best way. We let that simmer. What actually happens? Are you burning? Are you overcooking? Simmering is basically the heat's on low, and you're just allowing that emotion to kind of linger. But you're not kind of drowning that in emotion and going, oh, this makes me feel sick. I want to eat something. I want to, drink something. I want to watch something, consume something, and just get rid of this feeling. Just let it simmer. And again, going back to the yogi method, and just take a really deep breath in and then let it breathe out. And no, it doesn't go away. It's still there. But as on a percentage scale, I can guarantee you, out of 10, it's brought down to at least a 9.3. Would you agree? Now, if you repeat this, there's compounding. Just like if you were to save into a bank account and you get some interest, and yeah, interest rates are terrible. It's more like from a crypto analogy, like if you keep investing in something that incrementally goes up in the scarcity, that'll increase, right? Like, it's going to have a compounding, like an exponential rate. So that if you do that breath rate once, and it brings it down to the edge, that takes the pain out from a 10 to a 9.3, what happens if you take 5 to 10 breaths, 15 breaths, 20 breaths? And just let it simmer, right? I can guarantee you there's no burning. You're not going to overcook it. You're not going to feel it, like the world doesn't come crumbling down. And you start to realize that same notion that someone will actually feel that and hear that and see that what you're achieving, your future self achieving those things, they're going to have that same notion. It's going to simmer, and it just becomes normal. Like, Ralph or Allison or whatever your name is, actually achieves something or does something or puts themselves out there. It's shocking at first, but then it just becomes, blah, blah, is just putting themselves out there. Like, it doesn't impact you at all. Like, unless people direct message you and tell you to your face and keep repeating it over and over again, the same notion applies. It'll just pass. It just becomes the norm. It then becomes, they forget that who your past self was, because your future self becomes the norm. And, you may as well do a dramatic shift and dramatic change and just rip that Band-Aid off. And yeah, I know it's hard and it's difficult to actually talk through this, because it's easy just to talk through and just not have that. But, firsthand, I know that feeling. And firsthand, I'm, had those high feels of, that empathy and actually feeling that cringe, like to the power of 1,000, it feels like. But what I've come to learn is you got to put yourself out there, regardless of how behind the scenes you want to be. If you want to create this automation software and, you're behind the scenes, you still have to put yourself out there. You still have to talk to potential business partners and clients and suppliers, and, key alliances and networks and, podcasts and media outlets, and you still have to put yourself out there. And you can very much hide behind the scenes, which I definitely thought with a lot of the businesses I started initially, was to just be behind the scenes, and that's not in my nature to be seen, and you kind of reframe it in a way that makes you feel a bit better, like, oh yeah, I'm not egotistical in that manner, I'm happy to be behind the scenes, like I'm good, but really it's just a lie you're telling yourself to just hide from being in the spotlight, to really shine, and I think that's something to really dwell on. Now, like the whole notion of this is actually working out what it is you want and being specific with that notion, and being bold in that notion as well. And yeah, it's going to sound outrageous. It's going to sound so ridiculous that it may make you cringe. But it makes you cringe because you're hearing it as a third party to what it is you actually want. And let me repeat that. You're going to cringe because you're going to feel like that awareness that's hearing it, that chimpanzee part of us that actually hears that bold statement, that goal, is the same as a third party cringing when you say something that sounds so ridiculous because it's so far removed from where you are right now. Right? So really just kind of let that dwell and consider for a moment that same strategy and just really breathing through it and let it simmer. And I'm going to leave that with you. Like, just let it simmer over and over again. Just let it simmer, let it simmer. Say something ridiculous. Say something so far removed from where you are now. I'm going to have, X turnover business, and not just turnover in terms of sales, but net profitability will be this, then will provide me this, which will provide me, independence and time freedom, flexibility. It'll continue to grow year on year. I can work from home. I can do this. I can do that. What it is, like with specific intent, what's the nature of it? Who you serving? What are you doing? Who you partnered up with? What's the size of your organization or business you want to actually create? And, really bring it in. Like, what is really visualize the identity, the branding, your own personal brand in its own right. Like, how are you walking, talking on the weekends? When you go to the mall to grab a present and you're going solo, how are you walking to that store, to that shop? What are you wearing? How are you walking? How are you talking to that vendor? How are you in the future, knowing that you have achieved these values that you're so hard, you're pursuing, so you're striving to pursue? Like, you've got that time freedom, you got the flexibility, you got the independence. You've been building that wealth accumulation vehicle, and now how do you walk? How do you talk? Right? So being specific in the future, which in turn mold a future self from that. Hopefully this is making sense. So having specificity with what it is you want basically allows you to be molded from what it is that you've achieved, and therefore how do you act in accordance with achieving that goal. Now, I use this a lot, like with myself and also with other people, is people are, they have that anxiety with money and what have you. And let's just say you do have that money, but let's just say the bills are still outstanding, but you have the money, right? You just haven't got to paying it. What's the anxiety, right? It's like they're going to get paid. Like, yeah, I'll get to it. And I'm sorry, I forgot, I'll do it, in the evening or, when I get home. I'm busy right now, but, you'll get paid. Versus, I don't have this money to pay this. I'll get to it. What's the difference in that feeling? You feel full. You feel like you have more than enough. You feel like you can pay, right? Then now think, how did I get into this position where I am right now? Like, what did my current self do that my future self would be like, never again? Like, what will your future self say to your current self that have got you into this predicament in the first place? Did you, it could have been a past mistake that you're revisiting over and over again in your conscious awareness, and you're repeating it over and over again, versus, something that you splurged on, your delayed gratification wasn't activated at that point, and that's okay. But what does your future self say? Like, in a non-egotistical way, in a serving way? Like, how do you offend yourself? Like, what does your future self say to your current self right now? Okay. And know that even if you do have money, your bills are still outstanding. So what's the difference in this feeling is knowing that you have the money. Now, to be able to create the money to then pay those bills on short notice, with the ability to create that, to leverage that, to pre-sell something, what it is that you can kind of allow that anxiety to let it simmer, to actually work out a creative solution to solve the problem. How is that different from having bills outstanding and having money in the bank and you physically not being at your internet banking or actually physically transfer that money to the person that you haven't paid yet? What's the difference between not having the money and finding time and with no anxiety about, those pressures kind of looming, but strategically just looking at a way to kind of, okay, I'm going to keep them at bay. I'm going to apologize because this is not something I'm proud of, but I'm going to apologize. I want to work out an arrangement so I can pay them eventually and work out a future date. And very calmly and strategically visit, how do we create the cash flow now, right? Aligned the best we can, and it doesn't have to be aligned perfectly, but align the best we can to create the funds to then repay these things and then have the cash flow in the future to avoid this feeling ever happening ever again. Okay? So when we do this exercise, and again, once again, I know this feeling. I know what it feels like to overstretch. I know the feeling of not having delayed gratification activated, of wanting things now. I know things like having things purchased well in advance of being able to afford it. I know the feeling of wanting to impress other people, to feel that self-worth, because that was what was lacking. I know the feeling of like growing up feeling stupid and I just want to be perceived to be smart and successful. So therefore I want the materialistic objects that I have to far exceed reality and to give people that perception. I know that feeling. I know what it's like. And until you're able to then restructure that feeling and let it simmer, deal with the people constructively, because again, your anxiety is going to be portraying all these scenarios. Someone's going to ring your doorbell and someone's going to call you and you'll just see their number flash up on your phone, but just really touch base with everyone that you owe. People who are trying to press you for payment and all that kind of thing, and all the paperwork that's coming to your house, into your mailbox, into your email inbox, of saying this is overdue, this is outstanding, and just have a really good simmer on that feeling. Then constructively, just number one, just to actually just address what it is, like what's the most logical step forward is just touch base with every single one of them. A, apologize, and B, just have a strategic plan of like how you want to then extinguish that debt, and really just kind of evaluate that. And yeah, you might have to do some figures beforehand and what have you, but kind of just address that as soon as possible, because a lot of the anxiety comes from the communication of what they'll say, and being able to be on the front foot and address that the best you can, and then have a strategy to kind of meet those obligations well in advance, and kind of have that off your burden, your emotional to-do list, your emotional like baggage, so to speak, like that weighing down the fear, the heavy chest, the gut churning, and just feeling and just having to pretend to loved ones that everything's okay, and going out to buy something, or someone who commits to something that you have to match that expenditure for, and you kind of have the sinking feeling, and yeah, you just don't want to feel like that ever again. And just really holding on to that and really feeling that feeling of not having to worry about that ever again, because that's future self thinking. Okay, so we're being specific here. We're being very specific with what we want to bring in, what do we want to create, but we're dealing with it from a practical solution, and we're actually coming up with a strategy of how to actually create that. Now, there's going to be another episode that I'm going to record to actually come up with practical solutions. And this is the fun part, because there's so many ways you can practically actually come out and carve out that pathway. And you can think big, and you can, with risk comes reward. Not necessarily in all cases, but, there are methods to the madness to actually create cash flow very quickly, and to actually pre-sell, come up with a solution, leverage skill set, leverage other people that have common or mutual interests and or problems that they want to solve. Leverage your voice, leverage communication, leverage social media, leverage as much as we possibly can. Now, I'm going to do a whole episode on this, and I know it's going to be, overwhelming at first, but if you really work through it from a strategic standpoint, you can't really go wrong, because you're going to have such a huge brainstorm of so many things that you can actually do, create, and formulate. They'll actually get what you want to get done, ease that burden, and then allows the synapses to fire and wire, create those synaptic loops that will fire and wire and know that this is the problem that needs to get solved, and this is what will won't happen again, because my future self is convincing my current self, no, this is what got you in this situation, and let's get out of it. Let's practically get out of this mess and actually produce a result, so we don't have to get there in the future. We don't have to be there in the future ever again. Let's just deal with it. Let's just get the pain done, over and done with. And then we'll be more aligned with what our skill set and our passion, purpose, curiosity, fascination with whatever it is, whatever facet in this world it is that you're feel called to do. And you're being specific with that outcome, right? And yeah, we can mold and strategize away from that, whether it's temporary or if that's the permanent solution. But ultimately, what we're trying to achieve here is to leave space. Your synaptic loops are running now. They're in autopilot. They've dealt with something that was traumatic, and you've actually have a strategy to kind of alleviate that. And in turn, you're now allowing space and carving out space to then create that cash flow, to create businesses, to create... we'll start creating that empire, so you don't have to worry about this. And it can be so creative and so out there, and it can be done in such a way that doesn't have to feel like you're pushing. We're going to do it in a way that reverse engineers, so it's a pull. Now, the same analogy we gave you at the beginning of actually typing in your destination and having the coordinates, and then having that pathway to get to where you want, we're going to have... that's going to be pulling you towards where your destination is. Imagine a water being diverted, and the water needs to go. It needs to be moving, especially if it's going downhill. You're diverting that water, and eventually it's going to get to a flat surface. Like where it kind of plateaus, and that's where the end of the stream eventually goes. That's where the lake is, or the dam, or what have you. And you're diverting the water, and it's going to find its way. It's gravitationally, it has to move. It's moving with force. And this is how we need to think. We're not thinking of how to get water uphill. We're going downhill, and in sports, the analogy is, the interview at the end of the quarter or the end of the half, whatever sport is, we're going downhill. What's the notion? The energy, the team camaraderie, the everyone's on the same page. The intensity, they're in flow, and they feel like they're going downhill. They're on a fast break. They're literally going downhill, and going downhill is what we call it's not the negative, everything's downhill from here. No, it's the effortless pull, and yeah. Asterisk on the effortless, because perceived effort, the perceived exertion, if you're actually enjoying something, you don't feel the effort. Now, the analogy I give from that is, I'm not a huge fan of fishing, but yet my close friends that are, when I go fishing with them, they'll be bitten by mosquitoes, they'll be cut up by, sticks and rocks and whatever, but the exhilaration from catching the fish far exceeds everything else. And meanwhile, I'm bitten and not having a great time, but obviously trying to enjoy it as best I can. My exertion is higher than their perceived exertion, if that makes sense. So your perceived exertion, we're going to hack like what it is you love, what do you enjoy, what's your natural abilities and, communication style and your way of working in this world. What's your creativity? Let's bring it out. Let's go downhill, right? Now, next episode, we're going to be talking about this. And ultimately, this episode was just being specific, right? Like where it is you want to go. And it's something that is always missed. Like literally. And it's always, I don't want this and I want to change this and I want to get here. But, metaphorically just saying a country, but with where you want to go, but where specifically in that country you want to go. What do you want to eat? What do you want to consume? How many days will you be in this city? How many days will you be in that city? What town are you going to visit? What it is, like be so specific. What are you going to wear when you get there if the weather's this? If the weather turns, what are you going to wear then? And just being really specific. Like, I know it's dangerous and it's not nice because when expectations don't meet reality, comes sadness and sometimes prolonged sadness. But let's be bold and actually specify what it is you want to actually do and create and change to. And don't just think what I want to change. Because if you're not bold enough to kind of let that simmer, that uncomfortable nature of dreaming beyond what it is you have right now, if you don't get used to that simmering, it's going to feel weird when you're letting something else kind of outweigh, overburden your nature to be able to dream. Like you can't dream properly. So yeah, just let that simmer. Like metaphorically speaking, in this moment, just let it simmer, like everything what we just talked about, and then let's kind of go after that end result. Let's go after that specific destination. Let's go after what it is you want, and don't let the current circumstances overburden it. And the best and the most easy solution, but yet so counterintuitive, is just to take a huge deep breath and breathe out and trust in the law of average, trust in the nature of compounding, that with compounding breaths over and over again, the pain will reduce. The uncomfortable feeling will reduce. I guarantee you it, especially when you couple it with a positive or even a neutral affirmation. I'll figure it out. But right now I'm going to deal with just getting this sickening feeling off me. Just literally purging that feeling. Now I'll leave that with you. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.